Okay. Right. So that is done. We're live now. So anybody that wants to tune in will be able to see it, and it's public. Someone else promised he was going to join and said I should send him the link. I do send. If he's able to, because of network, I don't know, to join, he might also ask any question that he wants to. So to start with, I want to welcome everyone that will listen to our voice. That today my guest is Mel Good, and she is a community activist. In a minute, I will allow her to introduce and give us a bit of a background, because I think she's done so many things, Mel, that I won't be able to take a few minutes to adequately give a background of your what you have done and the things you've been doing. So please, can you just give us a brief?
Sure. Thank you very much for having me, Justin. So I guess I was thinking as I was writing things down and seeing what I've been involved in and how much and different times, that there are a few phrases that came up for me. One was jack of all trades, master of none, which is so I tend to get. Oh, and the other one is finger in many pies. These are two phrases that we like to use.
Like an octopus in so many
A little
things.
bit like little bit of that, little bit of this. So I feel like yeah, I guess I am a community activist, and I also see myself as quite a networker and connector. So I tend to be involved in lots of different community organizations and campaigning organizations and workplaces. And then I tend to find opportunities to connect them together, and to see opportunities where somebody who's working on this could help with this, and so on. And so I hope no one's expecting me to be an expert on anything today. I know a little bit about lots of things, but not a lot about any one thing. So that's how I would introduce myself a little bit. So in the past few years, I have been at various times involved with Leicester Friends of the Earth,
Yep.
Climate Action Leicester and Leicestershire, which is a network of sort of climate coalition specifically on climate change in Leicester and Leicestershire. Extinction Rebellion, and then Transition Leicester, which has in itself spawned various projects, and that's probably the most community focused, grassroots, sort of individual and community level action group that I've been involved in, and sort of less political than the others, which are more a mix of political campaigning and individual and community action.
Okay.
So yeah, those are probably my key things, and also through work, my workplaces at various times, and through my volunteer placements as well. I've also been involved in some climate and environmental related issues, and again done some linking up. So I worked at De Montfort University. I work currently for Sustrans, the walking and cycling charity. I volunteer with After 18, which works with young refugees and asylum seekers in Leicester. And I volunteer as a forest schools assistant with the Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust. And I'm a youth facilitator with Lifebeat, which is a youth camp organisation. So what I tend to do is I do lots of different things, and I try to link them up, or I bring climate action into whatever it is that I happen to be doing at this moment.
That is fantastic. That is, I think from the beginning said, yes, jack of all trade. But then I think there is a mastery of a tiny line of action that connects all of this together, right? which is environmental and community sustainability. So that links everything together from Extinction Rebellion to Transition Leicester, Cycling Charity, then connecting young people, Asylum, which I think would have been, okay, that's the one that looks to be, seem to be outside environmental, but then it's still all around making our communities livable, sustainable, and, acceptable to people who want to live and live cohesively together and build that trust. So I really appreciate. I think there is a lot you have done. I wish I've taken some time to do things like this. I'll be very confident about myself. So congratulations, and it's very nice to have you on this program, and you are going to lead us through understanding issues around communities that you have done. So well done to you. I wish I have a bell. I would have given you a jingle. Yeah. So
actually, you mentioned about the refugee and asylum seekers charity. So I
yeah.
did the classic thing recently where with Climate Action Leicester and Leicestershire, they had a conference, an online conference. Actually, I'm not sure if you were involved in it. I'm trying to remember because I can't remember things, but it was called Climate and Me. And they were looking for speakers to talk about issues relating to climate change in across different countries.
Okay.
And I did actually work with some young people after 18 to talk about climate change. We did a whole session on climate, a couple of sessions on climate change. And then two of the young women from the young women's group I was working with at the time did write a piece and delivered that, or had it delivered on their behalf during the conference, about their own experiences of climate change in their own countries of origin, and that was
Yeah.
really interesting.
That was very fantastic. I think ahead of that, I participated some, let's say, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, in that program, but I was not actively involved because I was still doing my PhD as at that time. Yeah, so it's a good one. I think it's something I want to encourage and begin to think that in the next edition I should get involved to talk about climate change from my own perspective and my own studies and experience as well. So thank you so much for that. To start with, I also understand, if you want to talk about this, that you've been at a point involved in politics as well. You once contested election under the Green Party. So, and at the moment, the world, whether the Green Party is winning or leading or not, but we know that everybody is clamoring for going green. All right. So, what was the motivation behind your campaign?
Well, I mean, I in terms of all the political parties, if I read, the Green Party manifesto represents what I believe in. It has, both in terms of green issues and in terms of social justice issues. For me, it's the most progressive political party in the UK. I'm, Caroline Lucas, who has been a Green MP for some time, is a wonderful role model. She's done some amazing work. She's worked in quite hostile contexts, and still managed to achieve a great deal. And she's introduced the Climate and Ecological Emergency Bill, which I'm a big fan of. I think it's absolutely essential that gets passed in this country so that proper action on climate change happens, and so that the government is held accountable for that happening. So my motivation was around really agreeing with the principles of the Green Party, and I think it's, unfortunately, in our current political system model, the first past the post system in the UK, unfortunately, it's very difficult for people from smaller parties to get in as members of parliament. And but I think there are several reasons why it's really important that candidates are there for people to vote for. One is so that they can really vote for the issues that they really want to, and also because the greater the share of the vote that happens on each election, the greater the platform that party is given on a national level, even if they're not, they haven't got MPs in Parliament, they will be given airtime. So that's very important for me. Yeah,
that's okay. That's I think that your ideology, in fact, from your background, and the ideology suits the Green Party, and I think the party will be very happy to have you, around as their member. Are you still an active member of the Green Party?
I'm a little bit less active than I was, as you can see from my history.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to be very focused and very involved in one thing for a certain amount of time, and then I tend to move on to something else. So I have recently been doing some litter picking with the Leicester local Green Party in one of the wards where they're hoping to get a councillor elected. And I've done some leafleting with them recently as well, but I'm not actively going to meetings. In fact, I haven't been going to many meetings this past year and a half at all, because I've been very zoomed out with work. And so I'm just getting back into real life meetings, but I have been missing from a lot of places.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. It's good to to have the length and breadth of all of these, and gives you more opportunity to speak on issues when you are confronted with, because you have first-hand experience of all of that. Okay, let's look a little bit into the climate change conversation. To your understanding, is climate change a crisis?
Absolutely, it's absolutely a crisis. Just in this last week, there's been headlines nearly every day, or the last couple of weeks. We had, in China, what has happened in Henan province in China is the awful stuff is happening. In Germany, there's been flooding. In Belgium, there's been flooding. We've had the heat waves. In Canada, and in the west of the United States. There's almost certainly lots of things not being reported on in the countries where things for us don't get reported on as much, unfortunately, because of how the news works. And there's scientists saying we think we've underpredicted. We think we have actually, things seem to be getting more serious more quickly than we expected. It's absolutely a crisis.
Yeah. I think I agree with you absolutely that the scientists predicted the impacts of this issue, because yearly we have these temperatures rising more than what was predicted. We have disasters happening more frequently and becoming more catastrophic than how they were predicted. I think so. What do you think? Now it's a crisis that is established. So what is the way forward now from community perspective? What do you think communities now can do? In one way would be mitigation, the other way would be adaptation, whichever one, how you want to approach this. What do you think when you meet with communities, when you sit back as an extinction rebellion? What do you demand when you understand that this is actually a crisis?
Yeah, well, it's everything, isn't it? We have to demand everything. We have to demand that governments are working together at COP26. We have to demand that there is fairness and justice in the way that both mitigation and adaptation are done, and that I believe that countries, who are suffering the worst effects and have been the least responsible should be getting reparated, or I don't know if that's the right term or even a real word, but they should be their adaptation needs need to be paid for, in my view, by the countries who have knowingly caused the most climate change. We have known about this for well over 30 years, and there has not been action taken during that time of knowledge. We need to demand that there's some interesting things going on with law, so we need to make sure that ecocide is recognised by the International Criminal Court. and we need to start taking corporations and governments to account for knowingly causing environmental destruction and continuing to do that in so many places. So the law needs to be there. We need to be demanding that governments act hard and fast, and that they do it in a fair way, which recompenses those countries that are most badly affected and least responsible for what's happened. And we do need to work on an individual level and a community level as well. It's really well known, what we can have some big impacts. Changing our diet is such a simple thing to do. Reducing the amount of meat and dairy we eat, everyone can do that. If people fly, 5 times a year, they can try and fly 2 times a year, or they can even stop flying altogether. It depends on their circumstances. Of course, if you have family, it's a different thing. There's all sorts of different things. But people who are going on holiday, people who go on, hen nights, flying off. We know that you don't need to do that. I don't want to dictate to people, but actually we're in a crisis here. Let's work it out. But also it's about making sure that people understand fully what their actions can achieve. That you talked about, I don't know if we were recording at that point, but you talked about your grandfather talking about a drop in the ocean, create an entire ocean. So there's something called carbon literacy, the Carbon Literacy Project, which I'm involved in, which we got started at De Montfort University when I was working there. We're just about to start it at Sustrans. I know in Leicester, the City Council are delivering it in schools as well. So it's really, because people can feel paralysed, especially when you're in a crisis. Paralysis is very common. So we also have to show understanding to our fellow people. And we need to give them the tools to understand what the crisis is and feel motivated and empowered to make changes on by themselves, but also with whatever workplaces or environments they're involved in, that they can act together, and that they can demand that of other people. So we do need to be empowering people. So the Carbon Literacy Project course is straightforward. It's a full day course, or it's 8 hours of learning, basically, however that's delivered. And it's really about ensuring that everybody has a fundamental understanding of what climate change is, what it's caused by, how it's impacting people, what issues there are around climate justice, and what we can do, making pledges. What will we personally do? What can we do in our team of people?
Absolutely fine. I think the most importantly is to get this carbon literacy program delivered alongside all community projects. I think that's what I would recommend. It is a core principle in the business school. That's Nottingham Trent University Business School, where I am. It is delivered by one of our professors and senior colleagues, and she is the champion of what they call principle of responsible management education, and she uses that to deliver this carbon literacy. So it's been running for some time now, and encouraging communities to take it. What we need to do, all people who are carbon literates, we need to do is to figure out those communities, places where people live, go to communities, groups, churches, and religious organizations to see how this literacy is translated to every nook and cranny of the human population. Because I think, like you would know, that once people are literate, their reaction to consumption, their behavior, attitude will be synchronized, and then they could now approach the mitigation aspect of climate change from a very realistic and sustainable way. So well done for that. And of course, you mentioned legislation. One of my colleagues attended the COP26, not the 26, 21, I think, the Paris Agreement. And he came back and was lamenting that the overall agreement was a shambles, because there was no legal binding on anybody to do anything. So what is an agreement without a legal binding? So when you mention legislation, is very important. Getting the private sector involved is very important. And I've put this question across to the big polluters, the shells and the totals of this world, because that was where I did my research work. I said, guys, you're going to be out of business. A time will come. So what are you doing? You need to do a lot, because in different ways people are holding you to account. In different ways, you are also doing your business, and how you want to transcend into a carbon-free system when 100% almost of your business is polluting or has pollutant, then it's a problem. So yeah, thank you so much for that. It makes sense on what we need to demand from the government. I think people that will listen to this will think about how they could reshape their questioning when they attend some of these meetings. All right. So how broad is the strategy of delivering the carbon literacy project from your interaction?
So from my interaction, I know that now I'm going to get the acronym wrong here. It's the business and something department in the UK government. I think it's called BASE, BEIS.
Okay.
And they have sponsored the creation of carbon literacy trainings across key sectors. So that's the university sector, which we've both had experience of. Also the I think they call them the blue light services, so fire, ambulance, police.
Mm-hmm.
They have also been developing in the NHS and local government. So a few different places, and I think they have sponsored a kind of a toolkit. So anybody in any of those sectors, and there may be one or two more, that would like to deliver carbon literacy, and you do not have to be an expert on anything to deliver it. You do need to have experienced it yourself.
Okay.
But can pick up a toolkit with they just apply for permission if they're in one of those sectors. They can pick up one of the pre-written toolkits and they can deliver it within any of those sectors. So that's quite a big project. That was a big project that was done, I think, about a year and a half ago.
Okay.
And those toolkits, I believe, are now ready to go. I know that in Leicester, we've just, I think Dr. Andrew Reeves at De Montfort University and various other people in Leicester have been, there's Gavin Fletcher, who's at the Leicester and Leicestershire Enterprise Partnership is involved as well. People from the University of Leicester, various other places, anyone really who we know has been involved in carbon literacy is starting to convene a group to discuss, to discuss how do we disseminate it in the Leicester and Leicestershire area. So from that local perspective, it feels positive. It feels like there are lots of people involved in carbon literacy. There are lots of people who are delivering it. And hopefully, like you say, we can get it into every nook and cranny. But I'm sure there's definitely scope and capacity for more. So anybody who's interested, I'd encourage to get involved.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I need to deliver all is to consult or email contacts base. There's a business energy. I think it's business energy and industrial strategy. I think those guys.
So if you, as someone who works in a university, wants to deliver, I would think you go through initially through the carbon literacy project website. It tells you about the toolkits and it gives you a link, I think, for how to apply to use the toolkit. And that may or may not go to BASE, or it may go to the carbon literacy project. I'm not quite sure how that works, because unfortunately I don't work in a sector currently that's covered by that. So I work for a charity, and currently we still need to do something called a criteria checker and design our own. We need to design our own carbon literacy materials and things, but I have got plenty that have been shared with me from other. It's a very
other people.
idea, but yeah, well, I also need to make it a little bit bespoke for the charity that I work for. So yeah, and there is a cost involved.
There's a cost involved.
Yeah.
So the cost comes from where they need to pay some fees to some organizations or people delivering the project.
So I don't know how it works if you're using one of the toolkits that's freely available. If you're in one of those sectors, you don't need to pay for criteria checking for the course, because it's written. But and I don't know whether they have funding for it or not. But usually, anyone who takes the course, if they want to be certified as carbon literate, they need to submit a form at the end of the course, which is done as part of the course, with 2 pledges and some showing that they've understood some basic things about climate change. And then that gets checked and approved by the Carbon Literacy Project, and that costs £10 per person.
Okay. All right, that's fine. I think that is achievable. Anyone who wants to do can easily do that. As the way it's been running in our school, I think I attended part of it. I think the introductory part of carbon literacy, and my objective or my aim was to become one of those trainers and people that would be able to deliver this in communities. But I got stuck with other things and I had to drop that so that I can focus. Yeah, okay. Thank you so much for sharing that background with us and sharing things relating to what has been happening around the carbon literacy project. So let me quickly ask, I also understand you traveled outside the UK and interacted with other communities, relating with nature, enjoying yourself. What would you say would be the community, the people, the places you've lived or traveled with, what's their own response to environmental or climate issues? Did you actually interacted with your communities with respect to these, or just want to know?
Yeah, so our most recent travels, myself and my partner Steve, was we did a slow travel to Puerto Rico in the Caribbean, where my sister and my nephew and my brother-in-law live. And we went in a slow and creative way to get there, so that we could avoid flying almost entirely. We ended up having a tiny little local flight at one point, and we went there and back in that way. But and we thought carefully about how we wanted to travel. We didn't want to, well, we also financially, it was difficult to just travel in that way and pay for hotels everywhere. But we also we always like to get to a feel for local communities as we go, and to get to know what's going on in the locality. So what we did is we did something called Workaway, or it's also sometimes called worldwide work on organic farms. So woofing is the short part of that. So when we went to the different islands on our journey, we were staying with local people. We were supporting them with their projects. We generally looked for projects that were either related to an environmental project in themselves, or to do with response to the big hurricanes. We went the year after Hurricane Irma and Maria really hit the Caribbean. So we had some interesting travels. We went to the main places we went to were Barbados, Antigua, Puerto Rico, the British Virgin Islands, and Saint Martin or Saint Martin, and we traveled between each one by boat. And we looked out.
So how did you, let me cut in a little bit, sorry about that. How did you took off from the UK? On a flight, I think.
No.
So give me, if you can, I'm really interested in the neutral travel that you took, the carbon-free kind of journey from the UK up until Puerto Rico or Barbados, one of these. How did you get off from Leicester? Let's start from Leicester on a bike Oh, let's know.
Yeah. we didn't leave on our bikes, unfortunately, but yeah, no, I'm very happy to explain that. I can't say that it was a carbon-free journey, but it was certainly a carbon-less journey.
Journey, yeah.
So yeah, so we took a train to Southampton originally, which is where Steve's parents live.
Okay.
From there, we took a boat to. I'm going to have to make sure I get all this right now. To Santander in Spain, and from Santander we took a train to Madrid, where we stayed with a very nice gentleman who was part of a peace organization,
Okay.
and then we took a train to Lisbon.
Okay.
And in Lisbon, we boarded a sailing ship, a large, very large sailing ship, which is actually part of a cruising company called Star Clippers.
Okay.
And what happens with the sailing this company is that, like many cruise companies, they spend the winter in the Caribbean, and they spend the summer in Europe.
Okay.
And so they have to move their ship from one place to the other in between. And so what we did was we moved with them. We took a journey with them in the autumn, going over to the Caribbean. So
Okay.
when the winter, we spent 6 months in the Caribbean, and then we returned with the ship the following spring. So that's how we
Wow.
did it. Yeah, and they do have sails, and we did ask a lot of questions about how much they were using the sails and how much they had engines as well, how much they're using the engine. Much smaller than a cruise ship that you probably have in your mind. You know, it was like
I'll be looking like a Titanic kind of thing.
yeah, no, it's like sometimes we docked next to a cruise, like a big cruise liner, and it just looked like the tiniest. It was like the smallest thing ever that we were on, but it had about 180 passengers. So not 3,000 or 4,000 that you get on some. But yeah, so we did ask a lot of questions. We actually got a presentation about the environmental impact of the boat as we went along. But yes, there were times, because they were working to a timetable, there were certainly times when they were using the engine. They used it in combination with the sails to minimize impact. And because lots of people on board are very romantic about sailing and would like to see the sails up too. And yeah, and sometimes they were able to use the sails without any engine as well. So
Without any engine. Okay. So
so
what the journey, how long was it was it Madrid or over to the Caribbean? A month, a week or two, or
now you're testing my memory, Justin, which I don't have.
okay. I'm just imagining, because it's a long journey. You are sailing all around, I think, from the Atlantic this way.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking at, my geography. All go to the top, and then it's a long journey.
Yeah, it was a long journey. So I think it was about 17 days from Lisbon to Barbados, which was where we got off.
Yeah.
And we stopped for a day in Morocco, and a day in Safi in Morocco, and a day or a short day in the Canaries on the way. I think it was about 17 days.
17 days.
Yeah, for that part of the journey. But well, for our entire journey, it was much longer, because also when we got to Barbados, we didn't just want to leave Barbados, we want to experience Barbados.
Yep.
So we spent 2 weeks, I think 2 weeks there, on a placement with a guy called Teddy, who owned some land and he was very passionate about environmental education. He had benefited as a child from environmental education, and he now owned this land, and that had been previously a sugar plantation, but he wanted to make it into a land which is doing something positive, and would help children to learn about the environment. So we worked with him on his land, and we also introduced him via various contacts. When we knew we were going out, we asked our various contacts, do you know of any interesting projects in these places? Dr. Andrew Reeves from De Montfort University, I think, was working. He had maybe a PhD student who was from Barbados. She put us in touch with a place called Walker's Nature Reserve, I think it was called, Walker's Reserve, which is an old quarry which was being renatured, where they also did lots of permaculture education, and they were doing all sorts of interesting experiments with farming and renaturing. And we were able to put our host, Teddy, in touch with them. We all went for a visit together. They were maybe 2 miles away.
Okay.
They didn't know about each other.
Wow. So 2 miles away. Is it because these are on different islands?
Same island.
Same island.
Yeah. So one of the things that was really interesting, the thing that I probably, we went and worked on these individual projects.
Yeah.
Possibly the more useful thing that we were able to do was we started linking people together.
Yeah.
Islands, and who didn't know about each other, because we are so curious, and it's my way of being a networker and connector, that as soon as I know something and somebody else might be interested or could maybe help,
you bring them together and they click. So that's why. So you have like a network of web of community people working on different projects within the Caribbean area, isn't it? And luckily, the Caribbean entity, it's an interesting geography or geographical location in terms of climate change. And when we discuss sea level rise, did you notice this fear in them about the impacts of sea level rising? What were their responses?
I think the way that sea level rise impacts most is around those extreme weather events like the hurricanes. Because they've got both the frequency of the hurricanes, the severity of the hurricanes, and which are both increasing because of climate change, and because of sea level rise, it makes it more likely that things are going to encroach on the land. So we mostly talked about the hurricanes, the frequency and the severity around that. Certainly you can walk around the islands and you see signs which say, I can't remember what the signs say, but basically you're in an area where which is it, you're at risk if there is a large wave coming in due to a hurricane or something like that. So you can see that around the islands. It's like, it shows you where you need to go if something like that starts to happen. You need to move away from the coast and up the hill, basically. I think certainly there was a lot of talk about the hurricanes. But certainly there was a massive impact. I mean, it was really shocking to see 1 year on, to see the destruction to buildings, boats which were kind of had been overturned and abandoned, or were just in such a state. The destruction was still really apparent, and places that had been kind of tourist hubs or beaches that were just not being visited. They weren't in a state to welcome people. There was a lot still there. Whether people were always connecting with climate change was it was often, that wasn't always at the forefront of people's minds, and that can be interesting, how it happens here all the time, and it's only just now the news. I mean, I think even very recently, I think I listened to a piece of news that it might have been about the heat wave in the States, and I was like, they just did that newscast and they didn't mention climate change.
Most times we see those things when you're quite aware how these things are happening, and then you come to the mainstream media and you don't see these things. You begin to imagine why is it not being covered, why is it not being discussed, so that people will know the damages this impact it's causing to livelihoods in some places, especially those small island states that are just developing, and then they suffer these eruptions. It's not been long. They had the volcano somewhere in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and then these things are beginning to happen. The frequency, like you said, the severity, the cascading impacts, because it takes a lot of time to recover from these destructions if they happen. So the next question I was going to ask you would be, what have you noticed across? So this could be a broad question as usual. Look at what has been the challenges working as a community a developer, working as a sustainable community developer, engaging with the politicians, engaging with the local communities themselves and raising awareness, engaging with maybe international intrusion and all of these, engaging with young people, engaging also with groups. What's particular challenges you think you've noticed that could hinder the development or the delivery of environmental or climate or carbon literacy programs?
Wow. Yeah, there's a lot of challenges. I guess one of the challenges is people feeling empowered, not feeling empowered.
Okay.
And so if you don't feel empowered to take action on something, but it's a problem, it's very difficult to deal with it. You kind of don't want to see it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't feel that you can do something about it, or that you have the capacity. It might not even be that you can, but you might not have the capacity because you're too busy doing this, or you're too busy in your job focused on your work, or you're too busy looking after your children, or you're too busy people are busy people. and so if you don't, whether it's through not knowing what to do or not feeling you have the time or the capacity to do it, I think those are some of the biggest
challenges.
Yeah.
Have you noticed even delivery, as we mentioned, some funding challenges, for instance, among those communities? Do people complain that, okay, if we had some funding, we'll be able to deliver even more projects, or been able to plant more trees, or been able to engage more people, or be able to travel? Did you come across such complaints?
I think, in terms of adaptation and dealing with climate impacts, certainly in the small island states was a massive problem. If you've gone to a state of the US a state of the US that's not treated like a colony, I should say, because Puerto Rico is not a state, actually. It's a colony of the US, and so that is treated differently. But if you went to Florida, that's been hit or whatever, a year on, I am certain it will look completely different to what we saw in the Caribbean islands, and that is because of money. Yeah, absolutely. There that in terms of reconstruction and adaptation, you look at Louisiana all those years ago with the terrible flooding that they experienced. That was because they'd been neglected as a state, and particularly in that city for a long time. So I think that is, of course, there are financial things that are needed in terms of building better public transport infrastructure and things like that. So yes, and political will is also incredibly important, and where there is political will, there is a way. And we've seen this, in the things that were suddenly possible in the past year and a half, because we had this COVID emergency, we had a COVID crisis, and suddenly things that didn't seem possible before, resources were found to make them possible. So if and that political will was there, and the same can happen with the climate crisis. That's my view.
Yep. Yeah, right. Okay. You just mentioned, you hit the nail at the point about the political will to do this. And we see that sharp difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden coming in. What is your view about the Joe Biden's political disposition to the climate change situation generally? Of course, we've heard, if you have been seeing, John Kerry has been frequently now talking about this crisis. And of course, I think it is a different language from when we used to have the Biden and his team. So, what do you make out of the Joe Biden's? Sorry, I'm talking about Donald Trump and his team. So, what do you make out of the political will, the language, the disposition of Joe Biden's administration in handling these climate issues?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a big sigh of relief in terms of, yeah, so finally. um, yeah, I'm actually doing it now. I'm sort of sighing with relief. But you know, there's a lot to be done, and I'm hearing good things. And I want and now let's see if we see the good things. And I guess that's my my aspiration, my hope is that the talk about environmental action from some of these politicians becomes the reality. I think it's a bit early, and also I'm not an expert on Joe Biden's administration to see how much is converted into real change. But I hear really good things. I think John Kerry is, you know, somebody who's very committed to action on climate change, and I think that's a very positive thing. And yeah, and I do feel we've had some wasted years there. But you know, certainly there were wasted years during Donald Trump, and things went into reverse, and it was horrendous. And we've had lots of wasted years before that as well, when people really did know what was going on and really weren't acting enough.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, so I know you said you're not really actively involved now with the Green Party. I was going to ask you if you would suggest that the Green Party work hand in hand with John Kerry in preparing for not just John Kerry, work hand in hand with even Boris and preparing for COP26, the Glasgow conference.
Well, I think, you know, I don't know the detail of what the Green Party are planning on doing with regard to that in COP26. What I would say is that the Green Party have introduced this climate and ecological emergency bill, or the technical term I think is a private members bill, but it's Caroline Lucas that introduced it from the Green Party. It has more than 118 MPs supporting it. Referring to what yourself said earlier about the legally locking in the targets made at the COPs. This is part of the point of the climate and ecological emergency bill. It says the UK must be legally bound to those international agreements.
Yeah.
Boris Johnson has not only not supported it, he has tried to block it from being discussed in the Commons. So he says a lot of things, but there's a long way to him showing that he's very serious about making the changes that are needed. I'm not saying there's not pockets of good things going on. There's some really interesting things on cycling that I can say, because you know I know a bit about what's going on in the cycling world. But you know there are huge, massive gaps. You know, with aviation. Is going the wrong way, with road building program going the wrong way, with, you know, there's talk about localized transport improvements, but it's not yet seen. So there's definitely a long way to go, and I'm sure that the Green Party will be putting pressure on the government to be making sure this bill gets its proper hearing and gets through.
Yeah. Okay. That's very interesting. I think the Greenpeace will be doing its best to ensure that necessarily don't need to be called upon, as the Green Party need to take the central stage in this conversation at all levels and do it, whether they're in government in some places or not. The representative of Green Party will need to engage and continue to take this, because honestly, they are the people doing the real deal they are the people doing the real job that is supposed to be done. So mounting pressure, it would have been okay. There's need to mount that pressure, but they have to operationalize most of these things, and in a way explain them in a way that communities will understand, and then give them the support that will need to go. Oh well, I understand that is politics. I'm not a politician. I cannot discuss. I don't have audacity to discuss political conversations and how they should be driven. So for young people, if I'll go back now so that we can summarize, the young people you work with, young asylum seekers and come into the UK, is there, do you pick any environmental issues that you engage them with?
Yeah, so we do a big mix of things, but as I often, as a teacher, I bring my passions into my teaching, and so yes, environmental issues do come up, and I also need to be observant of the sort of technicality of the language that I'm using. But certainly, I've had very interesting conversations with some of those young people about what they're what they've experienced in their home countries in terms of climate change, and what is going on in their home countries in terms of mitigation and adaptation as well. So we do have those conversations, and as I said, some of them did speak at the Leicester and Leicestershire Climate Action Climate and Me conference, which was great.
Yes, good. Okay, that's very interesting. I think recently, up until now, I've been also developing independent short courses to engage the people you work with, the kind of people you work with, young people and other asylum seekers, or those ones that class has had to reach children, or those who go to the university and then they feel estranged, you know. So I've started developing short courses that I could deliver to them. And these courses are all about increasing their employability, you know, sharpening their skills and letting them know which are the top skills that are needed in the industry. Teamwork, for instance, language understanding, maybe one or two languages, ability to interact in another language, work with people from different backgrounds and making use of people's strengths and not their weaknesses, or working and managing weaknesses together in teams to succeed, and all other relevant top skills that are needed in the industry that would deliver. So I'm creating some of those short courses that, so that when they come in and they have CVs, one of the courses also is about branding, which is about CV designing and how to craft a very good CV and measure the skills accordingly, the way employers will be attractive to a potential employer. So I've been designing that. So if you will need my services in that way, with any of the youth communities you work with, it could be adults, it could be people trying to change employment, any group that will need this kind of career or what do they call it, an employability support, I'll be very willing to support them. Especially, I'm concerned about the young asylum seekers, so that we'll repackage them and they become more useful and feel confident in the communities they are living and working and also contributing to the economy, just like every other person. So if you need that, give me a shout and I'll be able to do what I can. All right.
Thanks, Justin. Yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
great. I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah. So last thing I want to ask before we go is just to ask you a personal question now. Going forward, what's your drive? What do you want to keep doing in the next 2, 3 years, maybe? You want to go traveling again, go to take another location and support and create networks of people, or take a career again, or what's in the next 2 years? What do we see you doing, so that we keep monitoring and tap from what you are doing?
Well, Oh, wow, goodness. Well, I'm not always great at looking very hard ahead for myself, very far ahead for myself. I'm quite good at looking far ahead for the world.
Okay. So tell us about the world.
Well, the world, we need to, yeah, we really need to keep up the pressure. I guess that's what I need to be doing, is I need to be taking up the opportunities to keep up the pressure. I think, you know, COP26 is a big one. So we've got a project that we're looking at work, where we're involving young people again through schools and thinking about their own travel carbon footprints and how that relates to COP, and making pledges around that, and working together on that. So, you know, yeah, we're talking with Leicester Friends of the Earth about a campaign leading up to COP, maybe something about with eyes, and keeping our eyes on the politician. We're watching those politicians, and we want to see, you know, that they're delivering on climate justice and really ambitious targets which are legally binding, as you say. So yeah, I wouldn't rule out some slow travel somewhere, or some work in a different place. That's always something interesting to me, but probably not right there at this point yet. So I guess we'll see what opportunities arise as well.
Okay. Best of luck with all of that, and I do hope you'll be able to achieve and continue to push, and then continue to also figure out succession planning and mentoring people who will be able to replicate exactly or even more what you are doing, so that sometimes you'll be able to delegate people where you are not, and then you say, this, I think this person is competent enough, as he or she has learned from me for some time, and I believe they can, you know, stand in for me. You know, you will be able to see that. So that will be possibly something you consider going forward. I want to thank you for coming, and to everyone who will listen to this. My guest today on this podcast and program is Mel. Mel has been working in different places with Extinction Rebellion, Transition, Leicester, circling charity as well. I used to like when I see you with the helmets, and sometimes you say, oh, it's difficult having the hair and using the helmet and driving. So that is interesting. You also work with young asylum seekers and been youth facilitator in different places, and taking on long journeys, slow travels, and walking away. You've also been a politician, so we need people like you to get into the politics. So think carefully about it and keep pushing. And the community will always be happy to support you. So thank you so much for coming to this program today. I really appreciate it, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Justin. It's really nice of you to invite me, and I wish you all the best too. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.